All right, welcome in. This is the Individual Skills Hockey Podcast, a podcast that aims to bring quality education to youth hockey coaches, parents, and players with the mission of having a positive impact on the crazy youth hockey world. I'm your host, Miles Deeth, and today we are very lucky to have Mr. Barry Karn in the studio today. Thanks for coming, Barry, and how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. This is fun. I listened to your podcast about 3 days ago and just loved it.
Yeah.
So yeah, this will be fun.
Yeah, so a little background. I used to skate with Barry. I think I started probably 5th, 6th grade, and I always tell everyone, like, he was a big part, and you were a big part of me having a successful, at least high school hockey career, just because I was not a great skater, not a good puck handler, kind of like the lower end B kid, and then when I started working with you, I actually became an upper level kid, and maybe some of that's a puberty or whatever, but I always give you a lot of credit. So I'm super excited to have you in. So I know we could probably spend an hour on your background and everything you've done in this world, but why don't you just give us a little background on how you got started and how your business got started?
The way I get started is I met a girl, it's my wife, and she was a figure skater, and I was done playing already, and we ended up going on a skating date, and it turned into a training session, and I was trying to be cool, and I think I ripped my pants, and I was sweating, and she had me doing all these different things, and I literally was amazed by it all. I thought, this is really cool. I wish I would have, looking back, being able to do something like that. And this was kind of in the early days. There weren't a lot of skating coaches for hockey players back then, and she wasn't really thinking that she was going to be one. And then, we got married, and she was a figure skating pro. She was a very good skater, and she was teaching kids, and she had all these little boys calling her up for lessons. And she said, I don't want to teach boys. And I said, okay, well, how about I get a hockey stick and go be the hockey guy and move some pucks around, and their eyes just got big. Pucks? We can't have pucks on the ice, that kind of thing. And so it kind of started that way, and I was just so enthralled with it that I think I liked it even more than she did, but it turned out really good. One summer, all of a sudden, it was like there were like 6 or 7 kids we were teaching, and then by the end of the summer, we were doing 3 big full clinics with friends and brothers and all that kind of stuff. And I just thought, hey, this is going to be a great little part-time job, and it's fun. And little did I know it was going to turn into what it did. And so, I feel blessed that it did turn into what it did. So, yeah. So that's how it started.
Okay.
Date.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story. And then how did it kind of progress up into a full-time business as far as?
I think what happened is, I got married really young. I was 21 years old and had kids on the way and had to work. I had to work, so I had to do whatever. Going to school, working. We had this going. It was kind of a part-time thing here and there. And then we started teaching some privates, semi-privates, on some just open ice in different places. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden, we found we had enough people to, say, run a clinic. And then we sort of did the mailers, and we did all kinds of things like that. And it really blew up to the point where I thought, you know what, I can pay the bills. And, we didn't have very many at the time, living in this little house, and we're just kind of getting going, but it was good. So we did that. And then I thought, maybe I'll take on some other part-time jobs during our dead times of the year. And then there wasn't any dead times in the year. And we were teaching, 3-4 days a week. Things started to blow up. I started getting, people wanting me to do team clinics, and Bobby Smith, this was in the mid-90s. Bobby Smith was the GM for the new Phoenix team, right?
Okay.
So he invited me down there because I had worked with his kid, and he liked it. He thought this is going to be great, and I did that, and I started that in 96, and then it was almost 23 years of working with different pro teams, 6 different pro teams over all that time, and that's when everything just really blew up and became a business beyond my capabilities of running.
Yeah. So how many years has it been?
It's been 40.
40.
It's been
Wow.
40 years, yeah.
So it's safe to say that you you know what you're talking about a little bit.
Either that or repeated the wrong thing for 40 years. That's one of those things, yeah.
All right, so getting into that, maybe you could share just kind of like the whole idea behind Karn skating dynamics and kind of some of your core beliefs on how you go about things as far as training players.
And that kind of evolved too. I mean, I started out thinking I want kids to have fun doing really hard, challenging things. Like, changing the way you move can be a really frustrating thing, and it's hard and it scares them. And so I wanted to be able to break the tension by making sure they're having fun and smiling and all of that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden life, I started to see different kinds of kids and started to study the whole child psychology and psychoanalysis, and I still do. I spend time in my car every day before I teach in the morning, from like 5 to 5:30, listening to lectures of all kinds that are just really fascinating to me. And I started to see how I could help kids and finding out little things like 85% of us have stressors that actually keep us from fulfilling things all the time, emotional dysregulation type things. And it took me a while to kind of figure that out. I can see it in real time now. I can almost see it on a kid walking down the sidewalk now, what kind of kid this is, right? That kind of thing. So that ended up being probably, I would say, the technique is what we're trying to get across, and the development through lots of repetition on their own too. So this actually became the biggest majority of what's going on the ice, is dealing with all of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So you mentioned technique, and I kind of wanted to get into, I believe you call it glide platform training, correct?
Yes.
That's kind of your, I don't know if I'm good to say that, your deal. So maybe just explain the idea behind that. I know it's going to be hard to show it when we're just kind of sitting talking into microphones, but
they can see me moving my hands, can't they?
Yeah, on the video version, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Glide platform training, and that's a long developing evolution. And I can remember, just like your first slap shot goal from above the dot somewhere, I remember it clear as a bell, just seeing different skaters that were showing up, that were breaking the rules of power skating, and they were faster than the power skaters. And then working a little bit, spending time talking to Dick Verra, who is actually the guy who coined the phrase power skating. And they give that credit to Laura Stam out east, but he was actually around 8 years before she ever even started.
Okay.
So he kind of started that whole thing. And he actually, when he was working with the Olympic team, he actually had some guys showing up that were breaking the rules, and there was a timing thing and everything, and he's fat and they were faster, and he's going, hey, I'm going to show these guys my power skating takeoff and my power skating stuff. We're going to make this guy even faster. He's going to be like Superman, right? And it slowed him down. And he started to see the difference from the beginnings of power skating to what a skater is now. And he started to change. And it's unfortunate he passed away. He was such a wonderful guy and a great mind. And he just had a great communication skill with kids. And he started to change, and yet the book had already been written, and I still see the old stuff being taught. And so what glide platform is you imagine, well, let me back up a little bit. Usain Bolt runs, I think he's hit 27 miles an hour, okay, running. The average speed of a runner is like 19.3 miles an hour. The fastest woman is 22 and a half miles an hour. I'm going to get these off maybe a mile an hour or something, but
okay.
you kind of get the gist. Connor McDavid skates 28.7 miles an hour, and he runs 19 miles an hour, okay? So there's the difference between power skating and glide platform training. Down at the U, they have 20 years of U of M, Minnesota. They have 20 years of timing all the hockey players, all the men, all the women, for all the years that they were there. And they had these different standards down there. And there's a guy in particular down there that's just a genius, Cal Dietz, with strength training.
Yeah, of course.
All that kind of stuff. And so he's really good at testing and all of that. And so what he found is over all those years, there were different markers, like a 10-yard sprint, which is about a yard past the top of the circle from the goal line.
Okay.
That's 30 feet, somewhere in there. And so he never had a skater hit his running speed in that 30-foot mark, and had a couple hit at the 16-foot mark or 16-yard mark, and no one ever sped up past their running speed. And the numbers are like 1 in 300 hits their running speed, and everybody else is slower than their running speed. And the timing was going all the way out to 40 meters, and nobody could, no matter what they did, hey, stretch out farther, extend your stride, move faster, and they could look at the radar readout, and a lot of guys, as they tried harder and harder and harder, they actually slowed down. So what they were trained for was to get to a certain speed, but they couldn't surpass it. And that's basically what power skating does. They basically never knew where is an upper body supposed to be over the top of your skates. So because, I was 6'1" or 6'2" when I was 13 years old, just skinny, couldn't bend my knees. So what do I do to get my stick to the ice? I pitch at the hips, or I bend over my back. I've cut my biomechanical strength in half. No chance at all in being able to stay on glide now either. Okay, so what the glide platform is, and why someone like Connor McDavid can go 28.7, and I have guys that have been clocked over 30 miles an hour, probably 30 guys, 15-year-old guys that are hitting 25, 26 miles an hour, which is really fast. And then and Connor McDavid, who's blowing people away at 18 miles an hour, but that's a totally different subject, and it's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, we're going to get to that, yeah.
So he stays up on the surface of the ice. Like, treat the ice like it's paper thin, and you're going to go through your whole biomechanic or kinetic chain, right? So a kinetic chain is you squat down and jump up as high as you can, and the way your body goes through that motion is the kinetic chain, okay, all the way down to a toe snap at the end. And that would be a concentric push. You're jumping up. Then you come back down, and there's an eccentric absorption. So going all the way through the kinetic chain of your stride on the surface of the ice without cracking that paper-thin surface. Yeah. It seems impossible, and it is, but the closer you try to put yourself into a position to do that, the higher speeds you start to hit, because there's nothing now slowing you down. And the thing that slows you down in that particular example is you're riding your bike, first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear. Let's say that's your running speed. You're going 19 miles an hour. And it doesn't make sense now to take your foot off the pedal and start pushing on the ground, because your foot is stopping as if it punched into the ice even, and it kicks back. So you're wasting your time trying to go faster by using your running leg on the ground. Put it back on the pedal, keep shifting gears. So you're hitting higher and higher top end speeds. So you're pushing against gliding blades, hitting to higher speeds. And then the second aspect of that is none of that really matters if you don't get perfect posture control, meaning from the fore and aft position. We always think about edges as left and right, inside, outside, but really the most important thing to train your upper body is to see, can I stay on the flat spot and not roll to the toe or the heel at all? Like, just stay right over the top. When I stand there like that, and you can feel it on your feet, my toes are pushing the exact same amount that my heels are pushing, your upper body, if your low back is straight, is in the right place. Right. So that's a lot of what we do. So if you come to a lesson, you would see kids doing a lot of glide work in perfect positions. Then can they ride a gliding stride all the way through that? And we're working in slow motion. We start to speed up, get up to myotactic or reflex speed, which is really quick, 4 to 5 times a second. And things fall apart, and we just keep fixing them until it works, right? And then we add pucks and all that stuff. So
yeah, obviously that was a lot, and it's super interesting, and it's kind of you still see, like you mentioned, you still see a lot of the old school methods out there. So what are some of the things that youth coaches can maybe, like some cues that we can start to use to try to work on that type of stuff? Because when I'm doing a session with, let's say, 15 squirts, and we're doing some forward stride stuff, and I say, we're going to go easy. We're going to try to get him good posture, glide to the red line. Maybe we're going 50% just to start. And then the minute I say, let's go full speed and race, what happens every single time is we start pounding the ice. Our head's at the ice. Our eyes are looking down. Our upper body's out of control. Mm-hmm. And I always have to say, we didn't go any faster right there.
Right.
And I think it kind of ties into like our culture of working really hard.
Yeah.
And you see a kid with short strides that's moving all over the place. His head's bobbing all over the place. And you go, that kid's working really hard. How do we kind of shift? What are some strategies to shift that kind of thinking with our younger players?
Well, first of all, you have to have a model for what it is you're going to teach them. So the model has to be there. And, you literally have to prove it to them too. So if you have the model of, let's say, glide platform training, which is, it's not a complete set. It's not like we never use our heels and toes on the ice. We just minimize it as much as we possibly can in situations where you would think, how can that even work? And it can be done even there. Like the old takeoff, 3 hockey sticks laying on the ice and getting up on your toes and jumping. So going back to the test at the U, the technique, the glide platform test where we don't punch our toes into the ice at all, going from goal line to that 10-meter mark, beat running speed. It out-accelerated running speed. And the way I liken that to is if I timed you on the carpet at the airport next to the conveyor belt, and then I timed you on the conveyor belt, you'd obviously be going faster. Because when you set your foot down on the conveyor belt, it is moving. Yeah. It's moving, right? But skating is more, as you're running on the conveyor belt is also speeding up through the stride. So the stride, the base of the stride, the foot that you're pushing with is also moving forward while you're pushing on it. That's glide platform training as it pertains to a thrust. And so when you're looking at forward stride, for instance, instead of poking your toes into the ice over every stick, you can land on a gliding blade and you can push all the way through that glide line. It looks like 45-degree angle lines, basically, and those aren't exact degrees. It depends on your strength level, right? But it looks like 45-degree angle lines, and as your leg is pushing through that line, your foot is moving forward. I guess the best way to explain it would be, I think most people know what a swizzle is. When you sit there and you got your heels together and you push your feet out, that's 2 forward stride lines happening at the same time. And imagine you get out to the widest part of it and you snap your feet together to come into the next one. Those are 2 forward strides happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the best I can explain it on to a microphone, without jumping on this table and trying to demonstrate it, right? But,
yeah, and I think it's I think it's just tough for a lot of people out there to see those, especially when you bring up the quick starts. It to a naked eye, without timing it, it looks like getting up on your toes is faster because your feet are moving faster, sort of. They're covering less distance, but they're moving faster.
Right.
So
it's like when I'm supposed to clean the garage and my wife comes out and I start grabbing tools and just moving. I don't really get anything done, but she thinks I am.
That's great. All right, so I wanted to get into the kind of individualized approach to certain players. And the way I kind of think about this is, obviously everyone's different, and there's actually some players that have what would look like flaws in their skating technique, whether it be some players have like a really wide foot base or wheel base, and you'd usually teach full recovery underneath your body, or maybe somebody has a forward lean but they still skate pretty good, or maybe someone doesn't bend their knees that much. How do you approach that stuff depending on the age or
Yeah.
or the skill level, do you try to fix those things, or do you try to let those things continue if they're working for the specific player?
Yeah, that's a great question too, because we were talking a little bit before this started about some different players that kind of break some rules and it seems to work for them and that kind of thing. We like to still teach the kid what the optimal standard is that he could possibly achieve. We talked about scouts, and I remember the GM for the Sharks saying, "Hey, can you talk to the scouting staff? They don't know what you're talking about," because I was mic'd, and they're going, "What are you talking? What does that mean?" And so he goes, "Can you take like 15 minutes? I'll get them all together in the locker room." You talk to them, and 2 hours and 15 minutes later, after a lot of the questions, they started to kind of figure it out, and a lot of them were saying things like, "Oh my God, that makes so much sense. I'd never thought of that before," because, the same stuff gets passed down. Like, you probably swear just like your dad when you stub your toe. You know what I mean? It's like all these things, they just keep getting passed down. And with kids, like the whole recover under your body, we don't teach that at all. We teach kids that once you get on, let's just use forward stride. Once you lay down your foot, it should be laid down onto an inside edge if you finished your other stride right, okay? So if I didn't catch my toe, imagine you're skating fast and you catch your toe, you're going to fall to a foot that's pointing almost straight down the ice because you're catching your trip. You just tripped and you caught it, right?
Yep.
Well, if I snap correctly on the ice with a boost forward and my foot naturally just comes forward. Like, when you run, you don't pull your leg forward. It starts with the calf snap off the ground.
Yep.
And then your hip flexor follows through to bring it forward. It's not your toe digging in, falling back, and you have to stop it, and that ends up being a circular recovery if you tripped. And that's the circular recovery, right? If you didn't trip, your foot starts pushing back, but it's gliding to the side because it's on that 45-degree angle. It gets to the end of the push and comes forward. So that's a circular recovery too, but it's the exact opposite motion. And I know that's kind of hard to understand here without visuals, but I should be able to snap, and then when I set my next foot down, it should be on the inside edge, ready to push. And a traditional power skating coach would say, "Hey, your feet are too far apart. You have to recover into your other foot." And it's like, no, my other foot's gone.
Already pushing.
It's already gone. It's already heading the other way. So you can actually get a faster turnover in a stride at higher speeds if they're balanced and they stay on the ice and not grabbing the ice and all of that. They can actually set it down. And so then it's just a structural difference between guys. If you're a little more bow-legged, your inside edge is going to be slightly out to the side. And it's not going to be straight underneath you. And straight underneath you we call that the slide patch. That's where your skates should actually not have edges, in a sense, right?
Okay, yeah.
So anyway, I don't know if that answered it or
no, it does.
More.
It does. All right, so moving forward, I wanted to ask you about some traits of athletes that you get into your program that make them successful in learning this stuff, whether that be like personality traits or maybe age or physical stuff too. So
yeah. Okay, so first of all, I always like to people get kind of, the term is used so much binary about it. It's like, you're either this or you're that. And it's like, no, there's a spectrum there. It's like, if I had a little cup of black paint and I put a little mark down, then I put a drop of white in, a drop of white, and a drop of white, and I made 100 shades from black to white. Those are the traits of the personalities that I see in my business. When I get up to the pro level, and it depends on what it is you're trying to talk about, like what makes them competitive, you got maybe 15 different shades of gray there, right? And the other people have maybe dropped off. And one of the things that I see is the most important thing is self-examination. Like, when a guy can look at himself and say, I'm not doing this right, or I'm not doing it as well as I could, and I need advice because I can't do it myself. It's kind of a humble thing, and you'd be surprised at that level with the powerful confidence that these guys have that comes off to maybe somebody who hasn't been around it as egotistical or narcissist and things like that, and it couldn't be farther from the truth. Like, this guy knows he's the best guy on the ice. He's not been told that. He actually knows it because he is, that kind of thing. And people know who they are at that level. And the guys that don't, those are going to be the guys that are going to have a hard time improving. And I've seen it before. Like, I have, and I'm not going to use names and embarrass anybody, but worked with like some of the U.S. Olympic girls, and there's one in particular that has a really high IQ, very tough. Like, she's tough, she works hard, she can shoot, she's a C skater, C- skater, not a great skater, and she had a chance to come out and skate a couple times, and literally she starts to see squirrels after about 6 minutes, and hey, are we going to have pucks? That kind of thing. And we always do. Like, we always get into pucks and everything. But I suspect she's been somebody who maybe a power skating type instructor was trying to, she's bent over at the hips. And so she's unbelievably strong too, and quick and athletic off the ice, but on the ice, she looks like something's wrong. Is she sick, or you know what I mean? Like, she can't move. And so I think she has a real bad taste, because people were trying to get her to skate, but they didn't know how to change her posture. So everything they told her to do just wasn't working. Yeah. She's working off of 40% of her available strength because of her positioning, and then plus she can't glide. So yeah, I would say the humility of the player to say, I need help with this, and I want to keep getting better, even if I'm really good, because I have guys like that. When I was with Tampa Bay and Victor Hedman came over here, been working with some guys in Sweden for a while, and so he already knew what was going on. He was the only one there. He was the only student, and this was his first year. And so we had this setup where the guys took off from the top of the circle, they went around the center dot, and then trying to gain as much speed as they could with crossovers, and then head at the radar. So they would, he was hitting about 18 miles an hour right there. Nobody else did that. And then by the time you get around, hit 31 miles an hour going at the thing. And the guy's 19, and he was a string bean. And they're like, how is that possible? And if you even look at him now, he doesn't have quick feet. But if you look at his SAP numbers, he's got a really high top end speed. Yeah. And so anyway, and he was totally into it. He was like, he's one of those guys where normally you'd go, yeah, you don't need to be here. And he's like, no, I want to be here. I want to do, and guys like Landeskog and Ricard Raquel, this whole group of guys there that were just highly motivated, and they were high end players at the same time. I think they were all top 10 guys that year. Yeah. So, yeah.
No, you bring up the humility piece of it, and sometimes we get questions of, a parent is deciding whether or not to do some skating instruction, and I guess my personal opinion on this stuff is, I think it's for sure, like, when your player realizes that their skating needs work, and then they come in with that mindset, then I'm sure they're going to be set up for success with you guys, because they've personally realize that they have stuff to work on, and so I'm sure when you work with your pros and your college guys, they're coming to you because they know there's a deficiency in their game. They're not just staying in shape for the season or something like that. There's a lot of intention behind them actually coming out with you. So I don't know if you have like advice for parents on that type of conversation you'd have with your player before they see you.
Yeah, I think with kids is there's a lot of unseen things that kids just don't know. They have no idea. Yeah. And so some of it has to be just, you have to sort of pull rank in a sense, but you can do it and get the kid on board and tell him that efficiency in skating is going to be a longevity thing. Not only is it going to get you as far as you can go, it's going to be a longevity thing. So you said how some guys come into the summer. You know, I have guys that skated with me every summer, and now I'm teaching their kids. You know, so it's been a long time, right? This whole turnover,
Yeah.
right? But they're coming in there and they're going, you know what? Every time I come in, like my nephew Brady Shea, towards the end of the summer, he comes in. But he's been skating. I don't think he even remembers when he learned. He was so young. But he comes in to skate to just like get his mojo back in a way. And if you look at the numbers in the NHL, about 98% of all the hip flexor and groin injuries happen in training camp. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you can learn how to, like, we had a thing in Calgary when I was up there where there was 175 groin injuries from training camp to the trade deadline in the NHL as an average for a team, 125. And that was hip flexor and groin injuries. And you didn't have to miss, but you needed treatment and all that stuff's tracked, right? So we got it down to 2. We changed the way the guys were spending the first 6 minutes on the ice. It was all kinds of slow motion movement, going through all these movements, and which ends up being an active release thing. If your butt and hamstrings are pulling, your hip flexor is releasing. Right. So you send them through all these different balance things, and they had no idea that they were learning how to skate though either. They thought this whole thing was like whatever, and the guys were like, God, I feel so much better, you know. And it's like, well, look at your time now. You're even faster. So. Yeah. Those are some of the funny things we did in my early years. I'd have to try and trick them, and now I don't have to. Like I thought I had to, but anyway.
So move it like with the younger kids. Is that how you kind of approach it, where like they don't know, like, because I'm just thinking about like 8, 9, 10-year-olds. They're not going to come in with a mindset of like, you know, my glide's not good enough. Like, how do you?
I got about 200 of them, okay, right now, and they're
because it's important. It's obviously important. Like we all know that they need to learn how to skate, but they're not gonna come into your session like a professional and
we're getting waved at out the window. So little kids are mirrors of the training they've had with their parents. And I'm not here to rip parents. I grew up in a really, really dysfunctional, it wasn't a good childhood, let's put it that way. There was a lot of dysfunction going on. And so I studied this stuff for a long time, and I can see it coming now with kids. And it's not, I'm not a psychologist, but I did get a good night's sleep last night, so I might be able to explain some of this. But kids get between 2 and 4 is where kids get the foundation for disagreeable training. Doing something they don't want to do because it's the right thing to do, and you're going to get tantrums and blah, 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 and that's good, and you should work through that by the time they're 4. The 4-year-old should be able to maybe set the table when asked to without any complaint and do it right? And during that whole time, they're doing that, you know, he might be 2 and all he did was put spoons on the table, and now you're having dessert and you're like, hey, Johnny, put spoons on the table, everybody claps. And now he gets that dopamine surge. He's feeling great about himself, and he wants to get out of his chair and go get more spoons, right? That kind of thing. So those are the things, you know, that's the 2 sides to the discipline training, so that kids know just automatically that there's times where I have to do something that I don't want to, but there's a long-term thing that happens. And kids don't see too far down the road, but with discipline, with that kind of discipline training, so we'll do a lot of that with little kids. And you have to know whether your kid is that kind of kid yet or not. Like we'll do little things like I tell guys 4 8-second sessions doing, and these are kids that are really, put off by trying to keep their eyes up with the puck. So we do this little thing where they go home and they take a little ball and they turn on the TV on closed captioning and they read for 8 seconds, tap, 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 and then they can stop. And that's a baby step. I have 5-year-olds that could do that for a half an hour and screw around and they'd have a blast. And then there's other kids they'll fight that. They'll fight that little thing. But if you can say, I'm gonna make sure he does this every day when he gets home from school. He's gonna grab his stick and his ball right where he puts his backpack down. He's gonna go do his 4-second. And you can see most kids pop through that right away in just a couple of weeks, and then you can add something to it because they're starting to see the results. They're getting the dopamine circuit going with them. So anyway.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. I think I'm just gonna kind of go a little bit off script here and go a little random with my questions. But one thing I wanted to make sure I asked you is, what are some common things that you see? So let me back up. I kind of think of this as like kind of 4 levels of coaches when we're talking about just skating instruction. You have the volunteer coach that maybe has never played, doesn't really know what's going on. And we thank him for his service, and he's trying to learn, and it's great. There's a volunteer coach that maybe played at a high level or decently high level, understands the basics of the fundamentals of the game. There's someone like me who does this full time, but not in a specialty of skating instruction, and then there's obviously someone like you. So my question is, for those volunteer coaches, what are some things that they can implement tomorrow just to help with the skating of their team? Just really basic stuff that they can start to change.
That's a great question. If you go to one of my mite clinics, or if you go to my NHL camp during the summer, you'll see the start of the ice is exactly the same. And we set up our mites before the NHL kids because it's just so fun for them to see them all, these giants walking in. But then also they stay there and they watch for a little bit and they're like, hey, those guys are doing exactly what we did today, the same thing. And what that thing is that we do is we teach the kids about the paper thin ice, okay? So let's say I got 6 cones set up, down one half of the ice, let's say, spread out from the goal line down to the far blue line. And you've seen that with me a million times. And we'll tell the kids, all right, you're going to stand on one foot. You're going to stand on your forward inside edge, and you're going to see how quiet you can be on the ice. You can't, if you lean on your toe, it's going to dig in. You're going to kind of trip over it and walk. And if you lean back on your heel, or if you tip your edge too far, you're gonna see that your skate is starting to dig in. So just don't even worry too much about knee bend or anything, and tell them to stand as if they're carrying a glass of water on the top of their head, so they can't bow. Tell them no bowing. Okay? There's no bowing. Okay, so you just tell them to bend at a real comfortable knee bend. Just be loose, be smooth, go all the way around the turn. The inside edge is going to be easy. If you have really little kids, the outside edge is going to scare some kids. And so when kids are a little scared, the first thing I say is, listen, 2 of you guys are going to die from this, all right? So when they take off, the kids, you see their eyes open up, and then they start to laugh like, oh, yeah, okay, it's not going to be that bad, right? Yeah. So anyway, so they start to get on the outside edges and things like that. And we call those landing points, okay? So every time you set your foot down, like earlier we talked about jumping and landing, every time you land, every time you step, you should have perfect posture control fore and aft over the top of that flat blade every time you step. And so what you're doing is you're getting that configuration in around the cones. The worst thing you could do is tell them to hold their stick with 2 hands and put it on the ice. Yeah. It's the worst training for skaters than anything else you could possibly do on the ice.
Because
they're off balance and pitched forward because of their stick. So you have to learn to teach them how to skate, and then you learn how to teach them how to start squatting more and more to get their stick to the ice. And it's kind of a back and forth process. It's not like we don't stick handle. We do that every day. Yeah. We do a bunch of stick handling and vision training and feel training and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think the glide stuff with young kids is great, and we do it with the pros. And then they start going through slow motion movements, which are really hard to explain here, but going all the way through, an outside push and under push and going through that in slow motion. And it's surprising. A guy could take off out of the corner, make a big giant circle at center ice, be skating in slow motion and get himself up to 25 miles an hour, just pushing against a smooth glide. It's really heavy and sluggish feeling, but you're working on range of motion, all your adduction, abduction muscles. That's kind of the warm-up thing I was talking about that we did in Calgary, is going through those motions, and it teaches, right? The slow motion builds the neuron engine.
That's awesome. What are some of the biggest things, like if let's say you were talking to 10 random coaches, for at Wayzata Youth Hockey Association, what's the thing that people just can't get over as far as the old school stuff? Is it the quick starts, or is it something else?
Well, I think a lot of it, I mean, it's a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of it is people are so invested in the information they already have, they can't think of it as something that's not complete or it's been passed up by better information. So they have a hard time with that. I've had long time power skating coaches coming out and trying the stuff that we're doing and going, that's not right. That's not right. And I'll go, listen, I just timed you and you're a half a second faster. And he goes, yeah, but that's not right. And I go, and I just stare at him. and literally, I start, a couple of F-bombs comes out of the guy and he's like, God, what the heck? He goes, well, and then he goes, well, it doesn't feel fast. And I go, well, not yet. I mean, it's new for you. It's awkward. You're not moving as quick as your body could yet, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. I mean, we did a coaches clinic, and there were all the kids all the guys that were out there that you from your program, they were out there. They were awesome. They were great. There were guys out there that you could tell never skated really much other than, maybe with their buddies at the rink and whatever. And they were some of the most motivated ones. And then there were other people, like a couple of pro guys out there that were like, oh yeah, remember this, like Joe Motzko, he was out there doing it. And I actually used him to demonstrate, and I was pleased that he could still do it right. So
I think it's huge. I think it's huge for coaches to actually do the drills too,
Yes.
just so they can, when they feel that glide happen and then the light bulb goes off, they're like, then they'll start to believe more and then transfer that to the kids. So,
I got to say one more thing because this is hilarious. Because it's on that point. We tell our kids, all your dads and your coaches that tell you to bend your knees, they can't do it either. Okay, and it's like because I remember being under at the Excel Center and I'm shooting baskets with Charlie Coyle, and he's got no problem dunking, right? So he can really jump, and he's about 220, and he could bend down in his tennis shoes and jump over a hockey net. So that's a 50-inch clearance, but then he's landing on the cement on the other side. And I'm going, I don't think parents and kids know how strong these guys are and how many years it takes, not just to get bigger, but to get bigger with fast muscle is way harder than just lifting weights like Joe Blow. You know, it's a lot more work. So
that goes back to the point of like having proper knee bend requires a lot of strength.
Yeah, which a lot of kids don't have.
Yeah.
And then we see our numbers are 1 in 10,000 kids. 10,000. I'm going to see my 6th one here at some point coming up here that doesn't have a posture problem and everybody else does.
Yeah.
That they have to deal with.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. So I wanted to make sure I asked you about kind of where skating ranks as far as the most important things that we have in order to become actually a good hockey player. And I know well, I'll let you answer.
I'm going to answer because you asked me this earlier. It's like, well, which skill is the most important? Say, please, thank you, excuse me, or I'm sorry. And it's like, that's a tough one. And it's like, well, they're all important, right? And there's more than that. I mean, there's a lot more than that. And it's one of, let's just put it that way, one of many. But I think ultimately, when you're teaching a kid how to play hockey, the importance of being a good skater, the importance of being a good shooter, the importance of being a good stick handler, all revolves around what he can see. What he can see, the target he's trying to hit, the moving target he's trying to hit with a pass, the the sprint that he's got to go from A to B and get there. When they understand where they're coming up short or where they're exceeding, they know how to build skill from that standpoint. And they're going to have to build all those things. Like, you could be a really good skater when you're younger. And I look at you and go, you're not a great skater. You're strong and you're light and your mistakes are not slowing you down yet. But in a couple years, they're going to start slowing you down. You're going to wonder why everybody passed you by. So there's all of that kind of stuff. So they're very important. And being a skating coach, you'd think I'd say skating, but it's your eyes. And so hockey IQ is something that I see it in kids, and when you see it show up in a really young kid, like I got this little kid, Ari Sardini. Okay, her name is, and first time I saw her, I go, "Hey, Ari, how you doing?" And she goes, "I'm going to be in the NHL," and I was like, I just kind of laughed. I go, "Good for you," that kind of thing. And then got done with the lesson going, I think she is. I think she actually is. Like, she's just got great skills. She's fearless. She's strong. She's one of those kids that has no posture problem, doing all that kind of stuff. And now I lost my train of thought. What we were getting at here.
No, you mentioned the vision piece of it, and I think it goes back to, like, when coaches say we need to play faster, they're not talking about speed, right? And it's meaning seeing the ice and making quicker decisions. So how can that vision make up for skating deficiencies in a player?
Exactly, and that's like when you look at someone with high IQ, and we go back to what I was saying about the scouts grading a skater differently because he's smart. He's really smart, so he's getting where he needs to go, so he's a good skater. I look at him and go, he could get where he wants to go faster and even more efficiently, but they're not looking at it that way because they're not just looking at the pure skill. They're looking at, is this guy useful for the NHL right now? And yes, he's getting there. And so even at that level, there's a lack of understanding of what really good skating is, or you'll see someone like Brady Shea, my nephew, plays for Carolina, and he's been clocked over 30 miles an hour too. And you watch him and you go, his feet aren't even very fast. Yeah. Like, he doesn't have really quick feet, but he also has, he's also probably taken a third of the strides of most people. He's getting where he needs to be, and he's super efficient, and his heart rate is much lower than everybody else that is even in the same conditioning level, taking the same amount of strides because of the efficiency. So that's a longevity thing, and it's just what happens with eyes for developing IQ. You could have really good IQ. You could be a really good reader, but if you don't stare at the page, you can't read, right? So if you can't see when you're carrying a puck, there's just so much you can't understand. And if you if we took our listeners and I said, put your hands up by the side of your head, way out to the side, like reach out like you're, and wiggle your fingers and stare straight ahead and pay attention to the fingers on both sides at the same time, that's called saccade vision, not peripheral. It's the ability to pick up movement on the sides of your vision, and especially both sides at the same time. And when you watch NHLers that are really good, they're really good guys, you see them literally not tracking with their eyes at all. Your eyes can only move about 60 frames a second. Dragonfly eyes, 500 times a second, fastest eyes on the planet. We have the slowest. But our saccade vision is 350 frames a second. It's really fast, so we can pick movement up. So you look at someone like Connor McDavid, he never stares at targets, at passes or anything. He's learned to discern all of that stuff with the side of his vision, which actually makes him really deceptive too. It's like you can't pick up on his body language to know what he's going to do.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting, but I wanted to ask, related to that, I guess, and maybe you don't really have a specific answer to this one, but how do you see the development between, like, I'm thinking of a player that's very fast at an early age and doesn't develop the vision because the speed is so overwhelming that they don't have to use the vision ever.
Right.
They just blow
or their hands, protection skills.
Or they just blow past people. But then I see it the other way too, where people with skating deficiencies have that vision, and they also have better puck skills.
Yes.
Which it flips it.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know.
So what do you do? What you do is you take skating away from the great skaters, small space,
Yep.
and you make him where he can't function where he normally does, and he's got to throw his butt into people and stare around looking over his shoulder and all kinds of things like that. I had players in the NHL, and the hardest thing between both, going from, say, the AHL or college to the AHL was I had a guy who was up for the Hobie Baker, got second place, that kind of thing, super fast, played for the Wild, and he was getting called up, sent down, called up, sent down. He knew he was the fastest guy on the ice every time he was on the ice, and this was when we were in Houston, and he called me and he goes, "Hey, Barry, can I talk to you tomorrow?" And I'd already looked up video, and everything, because I knew this was going to happen. And I go, so he comes down there, he comes into my office, and I go, "Hey, what's up?" I'm not going to say his name. What's going on? And he goes, "Oh my God, I'm so frustrated." And I go, "You're the fastest guy on the ice. What do you think it is? Why are they sending you down?" He goes, "I know." And he just started to cry, right? He was really frustrated. So I showed him video of all of the things he can't see when his high speed was reduced down to the chaos along the wall and all the dumb things he was doing and all that. And he's like, "Well, how am I supposed to develop that?" And I go, "Do the things that I told you 6 months ago to start doing, but you didn't see the
benefit.
The benefit,
right?
Because
he was Hobie Baker.
Yeah,
He was flying.
You weren't seeing failure yet.
Yeah.
And so then he gives me the "if you, Barry," one of those things. And then he goes, "Okay." He goes, "Will you help me with that tomorrow?" And you can still see, like, you watch the NHL, and they get the live look-ins where the guys are warming up, and you can still see him do the very thing that he started doing over a decade ago, to start doing it. And he's doing it now. He's a great player now. And he's actually, one of his strengths is the way he plays on the wall. And he's a small guy.
Right.
So he's like, he's playing on the wall, and he sees now, he can see rear outlets and escape patterns. So before, you don't escape off the wall if you don't see it, because it could end your career with F2 coming straight at you, right? and then he doesn't see people that are open, and things like that. So all he's doing is eating the puck and just getting bit and, whatever. So IQ went up. You might have said, "Wow, that guy doesn't have good IQ," when you saw him on the wall. And it's like, he couldn't see yet.
Yeah.
He couldn't develop the IQ that he actually had, and we don't know what that is until you teach him how to see.
Right. I love it. That's an awesome story. We can kind of wrap this up soon here, but any other, like, big picture things you'd like to get across to either coaches or parents on anything you want, and then I have one more question. Then
okay. Yeah, I think what I alluded to before. The biggest challenge with kids is having a small, at least a small baby step thing that they will do for a skill every single day. And it's like, well, he's playing other sports and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, take 2 weeks off and quit. You're not going to make it. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. And everybody knows now, and there's so many things that are contrary to this that are just crap. It's not about you. It's about how you fit into a team and hockey in general. So health comes from doing the right thing for you, and it should also be good for your team and for hockey in general. Now, how does that relate? Well, we're in a recreation center. We're recreating this thing. So you work on your vision so your line mates don't start to hate you. And I know that's funny, but it's true. Like, I'm working my tail off to get open, and you can't see me because you don't want to work on the skill. That's pretty selfish, isn't it? And it's like, so you can't see me. Now I'm starting to resent you. Then I'm going to actually probably talk to the coach, and the coach is like, he's resenting the fact that he put you on the team. So now your lack of working on your skill didn't help you at all. You're still incompetent. Now your teammates don't want to play with you, and the coach doesn't like you. Greater hockey, Pat, The high school coach comes up to this coach and says, hey, what's this kid like? He's like, hey, he won't work on his skills. I don't know if he'll develop on a better team next year. Okay, noted.
Yeah.
There you go. So you want to work on, you don't really feel like it today. What's it going to feel like when you go through that whole process, in the end? And it's like, I think that's important for kids to understand, because when you don't want to do it, you're just in your own head, and it's time to get a schedule to do it whether you want to or not. Well, I'm tired. Okay, do it tired. I'm in a bad mood. Do it in a bad mood. Just don't wreck the furniture. It's like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that is the biggest principle that kids need to do. And it literally, if it's not with the right kid, you can push that farther. With the wrong kid, you'll ruin all his hopes of all your hopes of him ever even wanting to work on skills.
Yeah.
You don't leave a bad taste in your mouth, so you just baby step it.
Yeah.
Wherever you can.
Well, yeah, there's a balance there, for sure. But I say this a lot. It's as parents or even as coaches, like most of this is up to the player. Would you agree? I mean, like whether or not they're gonna do the hard stuff, and at the end of the day, hockey's very, very difficult to excel at. But like you said, I mean,
but I don't see kids totally becoming autonomous until they're in their 23, 24, 25 years old.
Yeah.
I don't see them really taking hold of their future like that. I see a really, really small number of kids, like little Ari Sardini. Hi, Ari. So, little Ari, like she's I don't think, I mean, obviously, and she's got these two little brothers too, and they're phenomenal. And the dad is a kind of a smiley guy, and somehow this guy's a genius. He's set them up for fire, like the success of being motivated to push themselves through things. It's amazing. My hat's off to the guy, right?
Yeah. Okay, so last question. Obviously, we talked a lot about the old school power skating method. How do you see this do you see any future developments in this type of stuff? The coolest thing now is the SAP chip that's in the jerseys, okay? Oh, okay.
So, Miles, you go flying around the corner. I know how many pounds of pressure on your skate each step. I know how fast what the acceleration rate is, what your high top end speed is, what your average speed was. We know Connor McDavid can skate 28.7 miles an hour and rarely ever skates over 20. Rarely ever. Like I was watching this thing and looking at the SAP data, and Connor McDavid came flying around his net, went flying down the ice, and you're looking, just going, oh my God, this guy is so fast. You're watching it. All of a sudden, the bubble pops over his head, 18 miles an hour. I'm going, I got 13-year-olds that can go that fast, right? And he's blowing the guy away. Then the bubble pops up over the defenseman. He's going 14. No wonder it looked like he blew him away. And then you're wondering, how did he skate all the way down the ice without being challenged? And it's 5-on-5. Everybody's out there. Wasn't a line change. Nobody was playing him. How come, right? Is it just fear? It's like, well, there's some fear. Like, don't get me wrong. It's like, I don't want to be the guy who goes after him and loses it. But that isn't it. Those guys have a lot of pride, and they welcome the challenge of trying to win against the best, right? So he's going down the ice, and then he was a spindly little guy when he was little. Like he could, I don't think he had good numbers in the combine at all, you know? Yeah. And so he was kind of a spindly little guy. So doing forward stride, which is a whole bunch of adduction, leg rotation stuff, very few kids are very strong for that. So they'll cave in posture-wise, trying to do it all the time. And he just instinctively knew, I'll just accelerate with these tiny little crossovers. Crossover, 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 crossover. So we know he does 10 times more crossovers than the average NHLer. 10 times. Think of that. You do 100, he does 1,000. It doesn't even seem possible, but he does. And so consequently, everywhere he goes, he could skate 6 feet, and it's going to be 2 or 3 crossovers really quick. His pulses are like 4.7 a second. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. It's really quick. And he does them all the time, and so he's weaving everywhere. So imagine you're skating down the ice, and you got this guy weaving, doing one crossover, two, three. He's changing lanes. He's all over the place. You don't know where he's going. The back checker doesn't know where he's going. Everybody starts funneling to the middle. Meanwhile, he's going over his blue line, over the red line, over the next blue line. Now you're like, I got to slow down and play this guy, and he blows you away at 18 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So that is the future of hockey, is knowing that all these myths we had about skating, we can now see them.
And
they're
measure
being tested. They're
measured,
being measured
using those analytics and those measurements in order to fix something in your game to actually make you more effective.
Yeah,
basically. So
yeah,
awesome. Well, thanks again for coming in. This is awesome. We could probably go for 3 more hours, but
I know. Sorry.
Again, if you have any questions for me, hockeyops@wayzatahockey.org. I will, again, really recommend checking out a session with Karn Skating Dynamics. If you want to give the website, that's
karnskatingdynamics.com.
There you go. I could have guessed it.
Yeah, with a K.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.